welcome to another episode of Biblio Files. This is the program on AADL TV, where each episode we take a few minutes to talk about one book topic. And the books that we are going to be talking about today are actually plays. My name is Lucy, and as usual, I'm here with Christopher and Amanda, and I'm excited to see what plays you have read to talk about. So, Amanda, what did you choose?
All right, so for today's, basically when I was trying to find a play to read, this was several months ago, I just went to the downtown library has a paperback theater collection, these little boxes, and I just browsed through them to try to find a couple more modern ones that I thought I might share. And I grabbed a couple and I finalized on one, and that one is called The Wolves, a play by Sarah DeLapp. And it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. It was a winner of the Relentless Award, and it is a New York Times Critics pick. And I really loved this play. This play was, I think, published in 2015 or 2016, and it is about teenage girls who are on a soccer team. And the author at the very beginning, one of her notes was that she didn't play soccer, but she was a teenage girl. So the setting or the way the play, and there's very little, speaking of how a play is structured, for this particular play, there's an author's note, and then it basically gives you just simple information about the setting, how long it should be, and then it lists some places that it was performed, and then it gives you a list of the characters. And the only characters that are in this book are the nine teenage girls, all around 16, 17 on the soccer team, and then it lists a soccer mom. And what's interesting is that it doesn't give you the names of the girls. It just has their jersey number. So 25, 00, 7, 14. And at first I was like, oh, how am I going to keep track? They don't have names. But it was not a problem whatsoever. So the whole play is, every scene is performed in the same setting. This is indoor soccer, so it's played during the winter in like middle America, just an average place. And each setting is, the stage is set up as a football field. It's like the pitch. And every scene is the girls on the field doing warm-ups before one of their big games. Every single scene, and there are 6 scenes, and each scene takes place in a different week. So scene 1 is basically like week 1, and it's just them warming up, these 9 girls. The coach is not present ever. They talk about him, but he's not present on the field. The captain, number 25, she's the one who sort of leads the practices or leads their warm-ups before the games. And it's just conversation. It's just the girls bantering and chatting while they're doing all of their very routine warm-ups and stretches before the game begins. And what's neat about it, the way it's laid out on the pages and the way you would read it or perform it in a play, is there's a bit of overlapping dialogue. So it creates this atmosphere where there can be a group of girls like on the side having their own little mini conversation about something, but then there's this larger conversation that several of them are involved. And again, at the beginning, it just says, number 7 says this, number 20 or number 25, 00, but it's not hard to follow at all. And it is written in this dialogue as you would expect, like a 16-year-old or 17-year-old girl to be speaking, just very short, very truncated. There's likes and ums and little things that teenage girls would say. And it was just really fun to be with these girls and just listen to them talk. And it was just, they were talking about so many different topics. One of the first things they talk about is like Cambodian genocide. They talk about their coaches' hangovers. There's a conversation about, using tampons. There's a question about, did so-and-so get an abortion? Or they talk about some of their soccer aspirations and goals for the sport. There's gossip from school or boyfriends or parties or sleepovers. But it's just really interesting to watch their dynamic, because you've got, as with most team sports, you have a group of people who are put together for a common goal of just playing this sport together. So they come from all different backgrounds. They have all different interests and personalities. But when you have a common goal of coming together and trying to win this sport, it's kind of amazing, like the family dynamic that can form. Not all relationships are perfect, within a team, but it's fun to watch their dynamic together. And you really do start to learn the characters and like what their personalities are and what they bring to the team. And I just thought it was really fun. And like I said, I played soccer in high school. I was a teenage girl. Our conversations were a little bit different. Our coach was very there, but I just thought it was really fun. And I would not have grabbed this book if it weren't for this discussion. So I'm glad that and I think I brought 3 books home. When I grabbed this one, I was like, oh, it's about soccer. And I thought it was a really fun book. So that is The Wolves, a play by Sarah Delapp. Christopher, what play did you find for us?
I found this book, The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. So this is really about it's a memoir and it's also a monologue, let me say that. So it's like a 60, 70 page monologue, which I think would be difficult to memorize if I were performing it. This book is really about the sudden death of Joan Didion's husband. And then within a year and a half, her daughter also died. So the book is an exploration of kind of regret, the lies that we tell ourselves and our children, and the unbelievable shock of someone dying, and kind of the fleeting memories that come back to us when we're looking back on our lives. Um, it's called magical thinking because, and I had to look up what magical thinking really was. It refers to the idea that our thoughts and desires, or sometimes our unrelated actions, can affect the outcome of life and reality. So if you hope for something long enough, or if you have a superstitious belief that's strong enough, it can affect the outcome of something. And I don't want to make more of this than is really in the book. It's an example of how the title is played out. But Joan Didion comes to believe that if she just keeps her dead husband's shoes long enough, that he will one day come back through the door. And there's much, much more than that, but it's an example of why she called her book The Year of Magical Thinking. Thankfully, there's really no resolution to this horrible feeling of death, and there's no consolation whatsoever. She doesn't learn to get over her grief and wrap it all up nicely and think that her loved ones have gone on to a better life. She's really filled with this kind of unending void and confusion of her life and what it all means. But I would say if there's any salvation to this, it's that she's laid her life and her feelings so bare that other people can relate to it. So I did really appreciate that about the book. She died just a couple years ago, but before she died, there was a documentary about her that also explores some of these incidents, these events in the end of her life, called The Center Will Not Hold. She also wrote the book, The Year of Magical Thinking, which is different from this play. And there's another book called Blue Nights that she wrote, also about her daughter's death and her daughter. So not so cheery, I know, but I did really, really like it. It was performed by Vanessa Redgrave on Broadway, and I can only imagine it must have been a stellar performance. So that is The Year of Magical Thinking, a play by Joan Didion. Lucy?
It's interesting. I read the book, The Year of Magical Thinking, and Blue Nights, and I did not realize that it had been adapted into a play. And I think that would be really interesting and sad, but
it's different, than the book.
Yeah. Okay. So the play that I picked is called Arcadia, and this is by Tom Stoppard. And it's probably one of Tom Stoppard's better known plays. He's written a number of plays. The reason I picked this is I saw it was written in 1993. I saw it performed at the Ann Arbor Civic Theater in 2018, and I've always really loved it since then, but I've never read it. And I learned that it is difficult to read. And there's a lot in this play. So it is definitely like a play full of witty banter. I would say that it's a humorous play, but it's got some major themes in it. And so basically there's these two parallel storylines that are running. One takes place in 1809 and one takes place in the present day, which is actually 1989, I think. but it just says present day. So it starts in April in 1809 in this stately English countryside house, and there is a like a 13-year-old girl, Thomasina, and she is the tutee, the student of a man named Septimus Hodge, and she's asking him right in the beginning of the play about carnal knowledge, and he's teaching her. He says it's like hugging a side of beef or something, and so right away they get into this one theme that's pretty present in the play, which is sex, not in a explicit weird way, but just that it's very much talked about in this play, even in 1809, because it turns out that Septimus is openly sleeping with Mrs. What is her name? Mrs. Chatter, the wife of this poet, Mr. Chatter, who's staying there. And he comes and he talks to Septimus, and they're talking about it. And Septimus is like, oh yeah, sure, I'm sleeping with your wife, but you're a great poet. And so Chatter's like, well, thank you for complimenting me. He totally forgets about it. So that's where this starts. And that's sort of the beginning of the storyline. While they're talking about carnal knowledge, Thomasina is also busily scribbling away in this primer where she is figuring out chaos theory and the law of thermodynamics. This is before that was something that was known. So it's just something her little brain is working on, which is kind of interesting. And so then when we go to the present day, we have this character, Bernard Nightingale, who's visiting that same house. And he is there to prove that Byron, the poet, is the person who killed this other poet, Chatter, because these are the clues that he thinks he has. We know, because we've seen the other side of the play, that that's not what happened. But Chatter was killed in some sort of duel, we think. Mm-hmm. And so the people in the second half of the play are kind of putting together the clues from the people in the first half of the play. And if it sounds complicated, it is. But some of the things that are really neat about this play, especially when you see it, is there's one set and one set of props, essentially. So they're used in both parts. They're in the same room. We know that they're in the same room. One is coming back later. But there's things like there's an apple throughout, and it's used differently. Like someone brings it in at one point in 1809, and someone takes a bite out of it in the present day. There's a turtle that in 1809, I think, is like a stuffed turtle, like a taxidermied turtle. And that same turtle is someone's pet in the current day. And so it's about more than what I even just said. Like it gets into emotion versus intellect. It talks about science. It talks about sex. It talks about fate and free will and man and the natural world. And ultimately they're realizing, the thermodynamics, the chaos theory is sort of teaching people that the future is disorder and it's just there's gonna be nothing. And that's kind of like overshadowing the second part of the play, because the people are reading Thomasina's old primer and saying, how could she have known that? I don't know. So it's like the two parts start to kind of mesh together. And some of the ways they do that are really cool are the people in present day, Bernard Nightingale and this woman named Hannah. They are dressing up for a costume party in Regency costumes, so costumes of the time of 1809. And at that point, all the cast stays on the stage together. And the dialogue kind of splits almost to the point where like someone from 1809 will ask a question and someone from present day will answer it, but they're not really answering the person from 1809. They're answering the person, so the dialogue really meshes in this very cool way, and it becomes very fluid. And like there's this part where Septimus, who's in 1809, hears a train at the end of a scene. And then the scene in present day picks up with that train. And so the connections like really go well with the themes of how people are connected to the natural world and to each other. And in the very end of the play, you have these two couples from these two different times. They are both waltzing, but in totally different times, totally different, circumstances brought them there. But the idea is that they're kind of like, maybe the world's doomed, but they're dancing into the future. And so that is the best I can do to try and describe it. I'm sure there's people out there who are like, you didn't talk about it right at all. But that's like scratching the surface of what is in this play, but it's a beautiful play to see, and it's very funny, but it's also just the dialogue is very like smart and witty, and then the use of the set and the props is really interesting and brilliant. And one of the things I always love about reading plays is to see how explicit those instructions are. Like you were saying, Amanda, there was very little in the beginning of the Wolves that told you about how to put this on, and this play is like, it describes the set very specifically, and it describes the plot, the props very specifically, and that I think is part of the joy of reading plays versus seeing them, even if it can be difficult, is to you almost see the behind the scenes and the inner workings. So I'm glad I read it, and I think I'll probably try to read it again. I would love to see it again. It is a great play, but it was more difficult than I thought, which was interesting. Having seen it, I thought I'd be able to understand it a little bit better. So that is Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. Does anyone else have any thoughts about plays today?
I think it's interesting, the 3 plays we mentioned today, the way, not just the storyline or the plot, but the way they're put together. Like you have a monologue, you've got just a quippy conversation with some young people, and then you've got a more complicated structure. And I think plays run the gamut of all of those. There's a lot of variety in the way they're put together. I do want to do a plug for another play. So Lucy, you read this one too. There's another book discussion group that we have recordings for here on AADL TV called the Unerased Book Club. And we read a book called The Brothers Paranormal. It was a play. And there were multiple of us who all read the same play. And we had such a delightful conversation. And we loved the play Brothers Paranormal. It's a bit of a ghost story.
Did you read it too, Christopher?
Yep.
You did? It was just so much fun. And we were just in awe of like, oh my gosh, why are not people reading plays and talking about plays? But one of the things we were talking about was people might have an aversion to plays or think that it's like just as dense as Shakespeare. And we spent a good chunk of the hour just ripping on Shakespeare and talking about plays. But yeah. So The Brothers Paranormal is a really fun one, and the library has that one in the collection too. So
yeah, it's probably one of the. I'm glad you mentioned it. It's probably one of the best things I've read. Like, play or not play, I just thought it just blew me away. And I think reading it would be seeing it would be great, but I think you get so much more out of reading it because you understand how it has to happen in this certain way. And then I don't know. I love that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's it, as always, we would love to know what you are reading, especially if you've read plays that you enjoy. It's sort of a different thing to pick up and read, and we would love more recommendations. So thank you for watching this episode of Biblio Files, and we'll see you next time.